I'd like to introduce our panelists. So please go ahead and we'll see our panelists now.
Hi, I'm Carol Marchetti. Can I go first, Erica?
Yes, well, I love, that I've had an opportunity to work with each of you over the years, and I'm really happy to see you all here. Now, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and then give a little bit of your background and what you're doing now in your role. Yes, we will go ahead and start with you, Carol.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there. Thank you, Erica. My name is Carol Marchetti. I've been teaching statistics at Rochester Institute of Technology for 23 years. And of course, many of you know that's where the National Technical Institute for the Deaf is located. So this is why I ended up with teaching deaf students. They showed up in my classes, and really teaching these students motivated me in so many ways. One was to improve my own teaching so that I could reach everyone in my class. And then it also propelled me down an avenue of research. So I wanted to learn, how do deaf students learn? In particular, how do they learn statistics? So it's really been a fun ride over the years. I've learned a lot, and I've enjoyed working with so many different and diverse colleagues and students. And I want to say I'm really honored to be here today with such great thought partners. I'm looking forward to what I can learn from this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Now, Chris, I'd like to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, folks. My name is Chris, last name Hewer. I do work at Gallaudet University, and I've been here for almost 20 years. I started off as a teaching assistant in Milwaukee at a public school with a general deaf program. And I've always worked with at-risk students and students that have a severe struggle with English, English as a second language students. And I've also run a tutoring center at Gallaudet University, and I've also developed online classes for English instruction and new English learners at Gallaudet. So there's a lot of work that I've been participated in and been involved with in strategizing as to how to provide instruction online.
Great. Thank you, Chris. We're happy to have you here with us. May, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi folks. I am May Kennedy. I'm an instructional designer, and I dive in deep into how to use technology to help instruction. I don't teach myself, but I do have a doctorate degree in design, in course design, and that has always fascinated to me. I've always wanted to bridge the online arena with deaf learning and overcome the challenges that are along the way. And so I too look forward to our discussion this afternoon.
Fantastic. This is very exciting. We have our math expert, our English expert, a tutoring expert, and instructional design expert with us here today. That's fantastic. Not to mention all the experts we've got joining us today by way of the audience members. We're going to go ahead and start with our first poll question for today. So here it is on screen. What has been the greatest challenge with teaching and instructing during COVID? Is it teaching online? Instructional materials changing? Accessible materials being available? Monitoring the students' projects? Go ahead and cast your vote here and let us know your answer. All right, we can see the results here. It seems that 37% say engaging students online. That's a big one. Good to know, yeah. And then next in line, we have accessible materials, which is perfect because those are two topics we plan to discuss today. So great, thank you for participating in that. So that relates, goes back to our first question that we have prepared for our panelists. What is your greatest challenge right now with COVID? It's pretty similar to the poll question. You notice some are teaching online. You know, we have some people teaching synchronous, asynchronous online. I just wonder what you all notice is your biggest challenge during this time with the teaching and making things accessible. Let's go ahead and start with Carol.
When I saw all those responses in the poll, I thought, all of those things, all of those things are difficult. I would say right now, as I'm teaching an online synchronous course, so we meet on Zoom twice a week, there is a lot of engagement, and it's Zoom fatigue as well, because I know that my students are in other Zoom classes, and they are also sometimes, you know, racing around to get to an in-person class and then trying to find a quiet place for their next Zoom class. So there's definitely been, I've had to thought a lot about how to balance this so that students are, I'm not adding to that fatigue. I've been thinking about, or I have been using a lot of sort of flipped classroom techniques. So offering materials online ahead of class, and then using the class time as really a work time with students, so that we work together then really to process a lot of the material. But then that gets back to, I had to get it all prepared to be online. So I saw that other response and thought, oh my gosh, yes, I am tired right now, because I have to think so much further ahead to say, well, how are students going to interact with this material? And if I would have said it to them in a lecture or written it on the board, now I need to include it, right, in my, I usually create PowerPoints and then make them into a little movie. But that takes a lot of work. So I totally can understand how so many teachers are having a hard time getting their materials ready to be online. And then, because that's just the foundation, that's the basic that you need. The next piece is that's even more important, is to add the engagement on top of that. How am I making sure that my students are engaged, right? And how do I make sure, if I have a large class, luckily I do not this semester, but if I did, how would I even know that they were all there, you know, in the moment? How could I check in with them? You know, my favorite part of class is interacting with my students and joking with them and finding out if it's their birthday and wishing them happy birthday. And that I find is more difficult when I don't have quite as many moments with them passing in the hallway or waiting for class to begin and things like that. But I would say that using the flipped classroom idea has been very helpful to me in teaching using Zoom.
Fantastic. Yes, great suggestion about the flipped classroom. You know, the exhaustion piece, you know, it's so important to think of that. You know, if you show up tired yourself, and they're tired too, right? And when now we put the online piece in there and people have family and work, gosh, it's not easy. It's pretty tough for everyone involved. I do wonder though about your flipped classroom. Are the students responding positively to that approach? What's been your experience, Carol?
Yes, my students are responding positively to that. I will say though, that I found myself struggling a little bit. They were starting to say things to me like, oh, if you could only post the materials this way as well. And I was kind of resistant to that at first. And then I thought, what? I just need to be do a better job listening and then responding to them. So it took me a little time, but I did find that when I came back and said to them, you know, I wasn't really listening. You were telling me what you wanted. And it took me some time to really absorb that. So yes, they are responding to that, but they also know that they can give me feedback, and it might take me a little time, but if we work together, we can make this process even better. So it's likely not going to be perfect the first time you try it, but being open to the suggestions that your students have can be really helpful.
Yeah, and you know, I really appreciate your vulnerability with it saying that, like going back to your students and saying, gosh, I really wasn't listening. Please tell me again. I think that's a wonderful model for your students. So thank you, Carol. Uh, Chris, do you have anything you'd like to share with us about what's going on, today's challenges with COVID and any barriers and what's helped you?
Yes, remember, I have 3 roles at Gallaudet, which means I have 3 different types of challenges, which I wouldn't experience if I was only working in one area. But I teach, I run classes, and I run a tutoring center, and I've developed 3 classes online for Gallaudet. So in one class that I've developed online, right, I'm now using that class to also teach. So I get a dual taste. I was there during the development phase, which was prior to COVID, and I was just done with the class. I had no idea what COVID even was when I finished that class. But then the news started coming in, and I started hearing more and more about it being a serious illness, a virus. And then the shutdowns came in, and we had the stay-at-home orders. Fortunately, I had the resource, the class ready, and it took me a year to get it ready. So I felt horrible for the rest of the individuals that didn't have any materials prepared. And so the spring, we made a switch to online, and everybody rushed through the summer to prepare their materials. And here we are in the fall semester trying to use those materials. And so don't blame yourself if you're frustrated and overwhelmed. We had to rush through it. And this is crazy and insane time we're living through, not only for ourselves as professors, but also for our students. So how can I deny they're having the similar experience when I know we're all stuck at home in our small spaces, trying to do the best we can with our office work that we have to do. And we see some of our students' homes. And it's not a pretty sight sometimes to have to see a parent trying to learn and deal with their kids at home at the same time. I wish it were different. But I think students currently are dealing with having multiple responsibilities happening simultaneously. I know that I, as a professor, am focusing on making my class as clear as I can. But if an individual is at home and they have kids, brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles, perhaps, at home, running around in the background while they're trying to pay attention to the class that I've prepared, they're not going to necessarily have a moment of peace to take the course in. I'm realizing that many students have limited amounts of time and many interruptions in their life that they've got to deal with. So online learning is very tough. There are sometimes outside interruptions to a class, and that'll disrupt everything. So as a professor, I have to have a certain amount of flexibility to be able to deal with that. Now, let's contrast that with the center. At the center, at Tutoring Center, there are a lot of students that aren't mine. And so they report to different departments, but they do share their struggles with me. And some students are falling behind. And so my role is to get the information that's necessary. And I've tried to assign to multiple tutors, multiple problems so that it can be taken care of. And I see institutions facing multiple types of problems. And a lot of these problems are similar, just in different areas uh, throughout a student's life. And they face struggles with online learning and even just developing grammar for online instruction and just taking the time to share stuff online is tough in itself. And so I'd say that we are facing a tremendous challenge.
You know, and I like what you said about flexibility. You know, it's so important for us. And I know myself as a college professor, you know, we often become narrowly focused. We have our requirements and we must this, that, and the other. And, you know, we've got to finish the curriculum expectations. We must do this. You know, we have to get through the content within this, you know, limited time. And we kind of get sucked into that and we lose some of our flexibility sometimes, and we don't often extend the grace that we need to. And I think that's one word that's been coming up a lot lately for all of us, is that we have to have grace for our students, grace for ourselves, for our peers, our colleagues. And it's okay to be flexible. If you're drowning a little bit, that's okay. You know why? Because we're not alone. We're drowning with a whole lot of other folks, very talented people. So I really do appreciate that. And, you know, you gave us a little bit of a head start too with you had a head start with the online piece of the course that you developed. So that's pretty neat. Before we start with May's answer, I do have one follow-up question for you, Carol. How do you provide access and captioning during that flipped classroom that you have?
I will say that my answer has been that I don't have any voicing. I write, everything is written down. Everything that I would have said aloud in a classroom where I might have an interpreter, instead I am putting as text. So I'm shortening it, right? So that it's not maybe as wordy as I sometimes am, but I'm making sure that everything is there. And in part that's because I know that the captioning is an extra step for me. And I was worried a little bit as well that the captions then would take up more space on the screen. Um, so it was that balance. So I chose to just eliminate voice and try to put everything on the screen. And that, but also remember that right now I'm meeting with my students. So when we first meet each other in Zoom, I say, hey, you know, you should have all looked through the slides and taken some notes off of them. What questions do you have? So of course, I'm going to take all that little bit of information and improve my slides for the next time.
Fantastic. So, so there's no interpreting needed, right? So if there is captioning, do you do that yourself then?
Yes. So if there's and there would only be short videos where I would do something like a welcome video for the course that I would caption myself, you know, to make sure that I'm, especially there's times when I teach asynchronous. And so I sort of have taken that habit and stuck it into my course this semester as well, just to provide a little video welcome. But in that case, yes, I would caption that myself. And I have learned that that's very time consuming.
Well, great. Thanks so much. Now, over to you, May, if you wouldn't mind talking about what you've seen out there in the field, the challenges during COVID, and what you've noticed that helps.
Yes, first I want to acknowledge what I'm hearing from both Carol and Chris and their leadership. I agree. During this incredible time, it just feels like a tsunami for many of us. Many of us weren't prepared. We didn't anticipate it. We didn't see it coming. And we're in the what do we do now moment. And we're also facing many challenges and we're all seeing them rise. Like the poll said, how do you interact with students? How do you make sure your material is accessible? And for students that don't have access to the internet, what do we do with them? What about people that don't have a space to do their learning in? There is a long list of challenges and things that I've identified that might have been overlooked but could help is making us become even more busier at the moment. And so we've got to look to technology to assist us in our productivity. We can use technology for teaching, but then we have to remember the flip side. Well, the student experience. How many emails are they having to read through? How do they balance that? How do we as professors balance how much we send? How do we balance our lives with technology? And that's actually something that came up in my feed yesterday. There was a TED talk about the pros and cons about using technology and the screen. And that's the issue that we're dealing with now. There are many pros and at the same time, many cons to using technology. And so I do have a link that I'd like to share for that TED talk. And we'll put that in the chat. But we do have to think out of the box, I think, to use the resources that we have to be productive and to improve how we manage our time, as well as support students and reduce the need for stress and productivity and focus more on the learning and on the engagement part. There are a couple links that I'd like to share with folks so they can keep these thoughts in mind.
Great. Thank you so much. I really like that concept of working smarter. You know, that's always our goal, right? So we can show up and really engage with our students and use our time and energy for the students. So that's really great. You know, what a great use of our time. All right, it's time for our next poll question. All right, here's the question. What type of instruction is your school providing? Is it in person? Is it a mix or a hybrid approach of online and in person? Do we have online synchronous or online asynchronous? All right, very good. Wow, 72% are providing a hybrid approach, a mix of both online and in person. Okay, very good. Thank you so much for participating in that. So now, talking about different types of instruction, our question for you is about accessibility. You know, that means interpreting, captioning. We all pretty much got that down, right? But there seems to be more, physical space, content delivery. We have to consider how we engage and interact with our students. So I wonder what you all have done to provide an equal access for deaf students in your classroom, just beyond captioning and interpreting. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. So, Kara, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I would say that I have focused for a number of years on participation and engagement, in particular in teams. All right, so I started this in an in-person class and have also used it online. But I want my students to work in teams in class every day so that they can be talking about the material, they can be practicing their skills, right? And they can sort of be helping each other to learn. But what I noticed early on was that I would have some deaf students who would be kind of even just sitting back, just not engaged. And I realized that wasn't they didn't want to, but there was so much talk going on, right, that they couldn't keep up with the conversation that was happening around them. Also, they were all sitting at tables. And of course, once everyone had a piece of paper to work on, their heads all went down. So even if they were speaking, right, their face was not visible to the other students at the table. So I started working with a group of researchers at NTID, and the idea that we came up with was to use portable whiteboards. So I started with some small ones. They did not work so well. And then I went to sort of large, 4x6. But they were still movable around the room or from room to room. And I gave one to each student team in my class. And that was where they were expected to do their work, to show their work, and also they could communicate with each other that way. As we all know, you can write pretty fast on a whiteboard. Students sometimes complain, right, that teachers write too fast, because it's so much faster than writing with pen and paper, right? So they do find that it's a fairly simple way for teams to communicate, where I would have a mix of deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing students. Because I had a pretty large classroom, and you might be thinking, well, why wasn't the interpreter there? That's because I had so many deaf students in my class as a mix. It was anywhere from 30 to 40%. That by the time I'd have 10 teams, 5 of them were mixed. I couldn't, even when I got 2 interpreters, there was no way to have an interpreter sit with each group. And honestly, it's also been shown, and my students kind of have expressed this as well at times, that they really prefer direct communication when it works, right? And so giving them these whiteboards to work with was a big improvement in how students work together. I also found that, as a benefit to me as a teacher, I could look around the room, and at once I could see what a team was doing and be able to interject if I saw they were going down the wrong path. I could go over there and ask them some questions that might help to redirect them. So that was a really great bonus. But I will also tell you that that wasn't the end of the story. that it took more than that, because I realized that a lot of students, as a lot of adults, do not automatically know how to work as a team. So it required over years, I sort of, did some reading, took in ideas from wherever I could, and came up with sort of a structure around which the teams would work. For example, they would create their own set of ground rules at the beginning that would address communication, participation, right? What happens when you miss class? How are you going to solve any conflicts, right? Where you can't come up with the same, you don't all agree on what the answer is or something. So that was a great way, right, kind of to get them started. And there were a few other things as well, throughout the semester, getting feedback from students, having them help each other, have to do an assignment where they have to decide how their team could do better. I will say, I know I had a photo we could share of my students working together at a whiteboard. I don't know if we can get that up now. Should we hold?
Arlene, could we go ahead and show that picture of the students? Great, thank you for that. Perfect. Gosh, you can definitely see clearly from the picture that all students are engaged and working together. But let me ask you, so now that everybody's online and doing Zoom work, are you continuing with that type of approach and group work for engagement and kind of doing breakout rooms on Zoom, or how are you handling that?
Yes, I'm using breakout rooms on Zoom, which is working fairly well. The students get to engage with each other. They can use the chat, right, to write messages, or they can just use their cameras, right, and show their papers to each other to see what they're doing, how they're solving problems. It has actually worked fairly well so far. And I usually will pop in from one group to another. And I do find it's nice. It's a little bit less formal for them as well. So I sometimes pop into a group and hear them all laughing about something. And it's usually not my class, but I'm just happy to see them engaging with other people. And they do come up with great questions. It's been a very nice way to, I don't know, sort of add to the class and have something different going on instead of having them just listening to me. I also just wanted to point out before you go on that I have a set of resources if anyone was interested, things like an assignment for ground rules and things. So I set up a Google Drive, and I'm going to ask Tia to share the link to that Google Drive. If anyone's interested, there are additional resources there.
That is fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. But I do have one other question back to the flipped classroom and then these breakout rooms that you're using. Sometimes it seems like, you said that it's written almost like you said you captioned yourself, and there's a lot of written words. So in that situation, I wonder if a student wanted an interpreter, or they preferred that their preferred language is ASL. Are you still willing to bring in an interpreter to your classes?
Absolutely. I would be delighted to have an interpreter join me. I do have a colleague who came up with an interesting solution over the summer when she was teaching this class online, and there was not an interpreter assigned, but she did have a student who said, "Oh, I'm just really struggling." And so what she was able to do, though, was send the video of her class to an interpreter after, and the interpreter just listened, right, and added the interpretation. And then my colleague was able to add a window in window. So it was really nice. So then she posted both versions of that online for her students to access afterwards. And I thought, wow, that was really great. So it'll serve as a resource even later on, right, for other students. So if that comes up again, she can even refer to the video from the earlier class.
Wow, that's great. And it's a lot of work to do it the first time, but it's amazing when you can reuse it in the future. So I think that's great. Chris, I'd like to hand it over to you if you'd like to share with us how you're providing equal access beyond interpreting and captioning in your classroom during this time. And this is May. I'm sorry, did you say me or Chris? Chris, please.
This is Chris. Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, I've already developed 3 online classes, and they have nothing to do with COVID. It had nothing to do with that. It was a contract that I had before coronavirus even came into the picture. I was contracted to develop 3 online classes that were going to be completely online. And I have had experience in doing that and teaching online before. And so each class had 8 units. For example, let's just say one class was about oppression of different minority groups and how oppression follows a person's life general based on something called all ports of entry for racism. And so I was able to show in that class how that applies to different minority groups. And in the 8 units, we have different discussions about various minority groups, and each unit has 8 tasks within it. So each unit is set up exactly the same way. And so when I designed it, I had freshmen in mind because many times freshmen arrive to Gallaudet and they have no idea what classes are like or what to do, and they're extremely nervous and they're not confident in their English skills. And some folks also are not even confident in their signing skills or their online computer skills. So it produces this bag of insecurity. So what I wanted to do is to clear that up and offer clear tasks. And I have task 1, task 2, task 3, and the course moves through the unit along those tasks. And I didn't want people to get disrupted in the first unit. That tends to happen. And so the first unit in the courses I developed have almost no testing, no knowledge checks. It allows for people to make their mistakes and gives them moments of learning. And then I built that into units, the corresponding units 2, 3, and 4. And I also have an example that I brought in, and I don't know if you're able to see it. I have some screenshots if you would like to share those now as to how I set up the units. Can we do that now, Erica?
Yes, thank you, Arlene, for going ahead and putting that on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to see on the screen an image of the course. And this is for a bilingual university, Gallaudet, of course. So we are required to emphasize both languages as much as possible. And so right now you see the English part of it, and you only see this part because it's in the Blackboard program, which doesn't allow me to add any video components to it. So I can't connect videos inside of the Blackboard program. However, if you share, well, no, let's show the other slides. Let's focus on the tasks first. I have an overview slide of the unit, the course, and also some of the tasks, and a discussion board as well. You can see on those images we're sharing. If you share the third slide that I brought, it should show some more of the visual working together. No, that would be the third one. Yeah, I think you're on the right one. So for task number 1 is an introduction. It's got a video description of what the unit's about, and it lays out what a person has to do. It's a simple 1-minute blurb covering those points, right? Again, what the student has to do and what the goal of the unit is. And then it indicates that they can move on to unit 2. So in the beginning, they just watch a video of some type within that unit. And then I make connections to the rest.
And then they're able to do more on their own. It's more visual, and it really helps support their English skills. And then when we're finished with the video, then I would lecture. And so it's already pre-recorded, and I really get in depth and I explain the connections, and it's there. It doesn't go away. That way, if the student can't remember what I said, it's a film, right? It's video. So they can look at it's archived forever. And that, and I don't know that everybody needs to watch it repeatedly, but they can. If they feel like they can't remember what I've said, please, my lecture's there. It's been pre-recorded. And like I say, we've got it there online. Sometimes I use boards, I do a quiz. Um, I just kind of step by step how I can get the materials. I get them to, and write papers in different ways, how to cite and do quotations. I have helpful guides. There's helpful stuff everywhere. There's so many tools available to us. And then at the end, they write their paper. Once they're done, the final task is a review of a checklist like, hey, did you do A, B, C, D, E, F? Great. Now go ahead to the next piece. And then when all of the students have completed it, I'll close out all of the other units. That way no one's confused, like, where are we? It's right there. It's the only thing available at that point. And I feel like that's really helped a lot with accessibility, because I don't need to worry about captioning, this, that, and the other. You can see the transcript right there, as you all can see, with all the links, which frankly I find it better, because if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you can click on the link, see pictures, you can get examples, like a book called Autism. And the students may to like figure out, what is unveiled, autism unveiled. Maybe a student doesn't even know what that word means. They don't know what veil or veiled means. Well, if you click on it, you can see, oh, what somebody would wear at a wedding or a funeral. There's a picture of the word veil. And then that can really help with a visual cue as to what the meaning is. And I found that super helpful. And we don't have that when we caption. So a lot, it's an English class, it's based in English. So all the videos and the links and pictures, everything being there and linked, I mean, it's a wealth of information. And I feel like it's a ton of access. I don't know. Sometimes too much is a good thing. I tell you, it's not perfect, but there are some students who really, really struggle. They really do. And sometimes they don't even understand that English. And, even all of this doesn't even help. And some of them don't have access to sign language. So sometimes the signing doesn't help, and that's a problem we face daily with deaf education, right? So I feel like my students are progressing and picking up really quickly. It really allows me to be more involved. Now I'm on Zoom, I'm available. I don't have to worry about different things and developing materials and everything. Why, you ask? Because I've already done it. It's already there. So that's worked real well for me. And this is, oh yeah, that's it for me. Gosh, this is Erica. There are so many things that I like about what you said, Chris. You mentioned videoing yourself doing a sign language lecture and then with a transcript available, or possibly an interpreter, that helps so much. And it's a lot of work in the beginning, but again, it's available to students almost like forever. It's like a textbook, right? Those English students, the second language often learners are often rereading a textbook, but signing is ephemeral, like it's gone. we lose it. And so once it's put out in the air, it's gone. So to record ourselves is really amazing. And teachers who don't sign, that's okay. Film the interpreter and then link it in the transcript. I think it's great. And then we have that forever, as you mentioned. And then your task list, man, that is fantastic. I think that really helps the students understand the sequence. I've done this, this, and this. And I appreciate that you kind of close out the old ones and it's like, nope, we're done with this. It's not there anymore. That way people don't feel overwhelmed with this lengthy list. This is Chris, 100%. That's actually why I do it. This is Erica. We often feel overwhelmed these days. So to give me a bite-sized chunk, give me 3 things to do. This I can manage. It's like a little snack size list versus the entire meal. You give me everything at once and I literally don't know where to start. But those little chunks are fantastic. I think it's a great way to enhance accessibility. There's one question that's come up here from the audience about a note taker. If you've got a student doing notes during class, I think it's great, as long as we make sure, someone is able to link with the class and they're available for everyone. Then I think it's fantastic. It doesn't only have to be available for your deaf student. I think it's great. Same with a CART transcript. I say it's available. Why not make it available for everyone as much as possible, for everyone to have access to that. So thank you so much for that, Chris. I really appreciate your comments. All right, May. What you just said, Chris, is so relevant to what I wanted to share. You said there's such a variety of access, text, video, And when you click on it, you get a definition. I mean, that's great. That just falls in line with universal design, and that approach is brilliant. And if you all are not familiar with it, I'd love for you to become more familiar with the principles of universal design. It's so important. I believe it encourages students to have equal access opportunity for a wide range of students. They can learn and express themselves. If you look at the technology piece as a universal design tool, that really makes creative and innovative instruction important. I have some links that I'd like to share here with you. A lot of very lengthy lists of strategies and universal design. So when Chris said it, I thought, oh my goodness, yes, because I'm about to share on that too, and call it universal design so everybody can go and look for that. There's a lot of discussion on this topic, and I'd like to pick one specific thing, and it's related to eye gaze. And the reason for that is visual learning. I'm a deaf person, and visual learning is so important, and eye gaze is a huge piece of that. Now, you might think, okay, eye gaze, my students can read a textbook. They ought to be, if they can read a book, they can read my screen. Let me tell you, yes, the answer is yes, but the research shows that our eye gaze and our brain processing capacity is different when we're viewing a screen versus a book. And when I read that, I thought that is critical, because it's important that we chunk our information when it's in text. And I'll show you a picture of a lengthy text versus some text that is chunked. And if you take a look here at the screen, I'll pause a moment, take a look here and see, what do you think is easier for your eyes to take in? Just take a moment and look at that. Oh goodness, we jumped to the next slide. Hey, great, here we have it again. I guess I can go ahead and sign while you have that if you've got me up side by side here. Now look at the text. Where are the breaks? Your eyes are wondering, where is my next break? Whereas on the other screen, my eyes can visually pick up what's important, what's next. I won't be missing as much. And being able to click on links is super interactive. So I think that's a really great bonus. Now back to eye gaze specifically, if you want to go ahead and show the next screen for me. This shows if you're teaching a synchronous class, meaning real time, you're online at the same time, be really mindful of your students and their eye gaze. Where are they looking? Are they looking at the teacher lecturing? Some deaf students do lip read, and they'll take a look at that. They'll look at you. Do they have an interpreter? Do they have captioning? Where is it on the screen? Where is your student needing to look right now? It's important to pace yourself. Give everyone an opportunity to take a look at your screen and then back to where they need to be looking to gain access to your information. So it's really great to have it chunked out and pacing. And then of course, engagement and inclusion. I'm going to use the word, I use the word universal design when I first started talking. And I think it's just so important for everyone to keep all these things mindful. This is Erica. Thank you so much for that, May. We know from our work here in our research at National Deaf Student that so many deaf students are overlooked. In fact, they don't even apply for services or accommodations. They just come in and take their classes. That means, whether it's somebody who's got they're late deafened, they have hearing loss. We have many deaf veterans who are college students. In fact, that's the #1 disability for our military veterans. And so they just don't really show up in our numbers. And that kind of thoughtfulness and using the universal design approach is all about everyone. Second language learners, our students who are not learning English as their first language, a lot of visual learners, for many, many reasons, they're included in universal design. And so it not only benefits our deaf students, it's just a great teaching strategy across the board that does happen to benefit deaf students. So that's just so important. And I thank you so much for mentioning that today. So we now have a third poll question that's coming right at you. So the good news is we are not alone in our collegiate world. And so I wonder, where are all of you looking to find support when you want to create accessible environments and engaging activities? Who are you talking to? Do you go to the DSS office, your classroom interpreters, your instructional design specialists, possibly the deaf students themselves, your peers or supervisors, or do you look to outside organizations? So if you all would chime in and let us know about that. Okay, look at that. The results are up on our screen. It looks like 36% go to support 36% go to the disability support services. And this is interesting to me that 7% check in with deaf students. Okay. Some people check in with the classroom interpreter, outside organizations. Wow, this is great. DSS is always a great place to start for sure. Now, we do encourage you all to also involve your deaf student with the planning. Often they know what works for them better than anyone. And so it becomes a team effort if you include the interpreter, the deaf student, and those who are coordinating these efforts to find what works for your students. Also keep in mind too, and it's what works now. Let's all be mindful that it may change later, and sometimes it changes frequently. Sometimes it even depends on just what's going on. It depends on what platform you're using in your classroom. That may change what's working. And this really segues into our question that came in from an audience person. Someone asked, what LMS learning management system are you using? Any accessibility issues that come up as barriers for you all? So, Carol, would you mind responding with what learning management system you all use there?
There we go. Sorry. Yes, we are using, I believe it's Blackboard is behind ours. It's called My Courses at RIT. And so it has its limitations, but it's been improving over time. It's easy to link things in there. It is one place that students can go to access all of their courses. And so I think that is something that they appreciate.
Very good. Thank you. Chris, what about you? Okay, sure. Thanks, Carol. Chris, would you like to respond to the learning management system question? What all do you use there at Gallaudet? And does it any barriers for you?
Well, we're currently using Blackboard Ultra. Again, I emphasize on the Ultra. It's the latest version. We used to, as of last spring, use Blackboard, just Blackboard. But in the springtime and the summertime, we all had that training in the Ultra, and we began using the Ultra in the fall. So we are ahead because we were already having classes like that online anyway. And with Ultra, Blackboard Ultra, some of the challenges are that you can't always add a video to every little portion of Blackboard Ultra. It's just not possible. It's not set up to allow for video for everything. So we end up having to make a video and then putting in a YouTube link into somewhere of the Blackboard Ultra portion. And right now the class itself, because the class is fully bilingual, and so at Gallaudet we prefer on speaking with different tech companies to try to explain to them the idea that we're working towards. The hovering mouse idea, meaning that we need a constant video, and we still need to be able to move our mouse around. And sometimes that changes until you find the link that we're looking for in English, and then to be able to open it up into a video in ASL automatically, so we can have that type of thing. So we've been talking to tech companies who indicate that that is a challenge to get a video to populate on over a word when you hover over a word. And so we've talked about it, and there are a lot of challenges, they say, in developing that. So in the end, we ended up going with Blackboard Ultra to be able to provide instruction. And Blackboard and Blackboard Ultra themselves both have similar technical limitations. And May, would you like to share on the question we just asked about learning management systems? And before I turn over to May, Chris, I want to ask you another follow-up question. Someone in the audience asked if you know of any online tutoring resources in American Sign Language to help with English. This is Chris responding. Do you mean an online resource that'll convert English to ASL and then ASL back to English? Is that what the question meant?
This is Erica. I think for those students who prefer caption or sign language but need some support with the English, so the tutoring in English, but how to coordinate that online tutoring for English if the tutor themselves is using sign language.
I see the question. That is a challenge for me to run the English Tutoring Center here because we have support services here, but we don't share them with other universities because they would be external students from other campuses contacting our center here. And that has happened where we are asked to provide that tutoring service for other states, and it's a problem. It's difficult. There aren't widespread materials for it. And I'm also trying to develop something like that myself. I have no idea when it'd be ready though.
And I'll say from my experience from the community college level, we did hire some tutors who used sign language. That helped a lot. It was very important. Both sign, those who use sign language and their content experts. Also, take advantage of those students who have already passed the class, right? Deaf students who have already taken and passed the class, have them come and almost like mentor, sort of like a mentorship program to help the students and support them. The ones taking the class currently, it's a positive interaction amongst peers. Plus, it's a really good boost for academics and supporting those students. You can also always have a hearing tutor and, bring in somebody who signs or an interpreter, and you can do that on Zoom. So if your college has tutoring online, I say, well, why not have a deaf student with the tutor with an interpreter? Now, of course, it's important to consider consistent interpreters with the consistent tutor and interpreter both being consistent for the deaf student to be able to become comfortable with the tutor and the interpreter, and a hearing tutor that knows how to work with an interpreter and a deaf student. So I think it's super important to be consistent. So any support academically that we can get, again, anything that's available for hearing students has got to be available for our deaf students.
Completely agree. And I agree. Now, am I supposed to respond to this, Erica? Do you want me to continue?
Well, it turns out we have 2 minutes left. Give me a 30-second response.
Okay. I've noticed the struggle. Believe me, I see it. Gallaudet is a huge program for deaf, and all our tutors know sign language. And that's half the ballgame in and of itself right there. Now, everything is online with COVID, right? And I think that's another struggle. There's nothing else. I mean, there's an advantage and it's a struggle, and it really depends on your perspective. All the students are deaf. All the tutors are deaf. It doesn't seem like we would need to develop anything else technologically because all the technology is there for them to see each other on video. But the question comes in when you have some deaf students at a hearing university or academia where not everyone knows sign language, then it really becomes a struggle. And we need to acknowledge that as well.
Absolutely. We've got to get creative, Okay, it's our last minute here. And I'd like to thank you all here today. NDC will have a follow-up email that we'll send to you all and share our resources that were mentioned during this live panel today. We'll share that out to all of you. So be on the lookout for that. And we do want you to know that NDC is here for you. We have a help desk and a team. So you can look on our website. We've got a listserv as well that you can subscribe to. We've got online courses. Actually, we have an online course specifically on teaching strategies for deaf students and preparing them for success. There's another course, Teaching Deaf Students Online. So please check that out. I feel like most of our courses are about 2 to 3 hours, and they're online courses, so check those out. We really appreciate our panelists today. Thank you so much. And our participants, and thank you panelists for your expertise, and gosh, all of you for sharing this hour with us. It's just been fantastic. And we'd also like to thank our interpreters and our captionist as well. We really appreciate your services in providing access for this call today.